If you bought an SUV in the last 24 months, there's a real chance you already lost more money than you think. Not because it broke, not because you drove it too much, but because the market moved out from under you while dealers stayed silent. Some SUVs are now losing over 40% of their value before the first major service interval. That's not depreciation. That's a collapse. And the part that should make you angry is this. The worst losses aren't coming from obscure brands or failed experiments. They're coming from vehicles people were told were safe, reliable, and future-proof. Stay with me, because one of the SUVs later in this list is losing value so fast that owners can't even trade it in anymore. And it's not the one you think. You're not insulated from market failure just because a brand feels established. The first SUV matters because it exposes how fast buyer confidence can evaporate when supply overwhelms trust. Take the Toyota Mirai. On paper, it was positioned as the future. A clean energy SUV alternative backed by one of the most reliable manufacturers on the planet. Here's what actually happened. In 2021 and 2022, Toyota priced the Mirai around $64,000. Dealers reassured buyers that hydrogen infrastructure would expand and that scarcity would protect resale. By 2024, that story collapsed. Used Mirais began appearing online for under $15,000. Some dealers stopped accepting them as trade-ins entirely. Not discounted, not negotiated, refused. Here's where it breaks. Hydrogen stations didn't grow. They shrank. In some regions, entire fueling networks shut down within 12 months. Owners were left driving vehicles that technically worked but couldn't be reliably refueled. Translate that into real life. You're not losing money because the SUV aged. You're losing money because buyers don't want a vehicle they can't use daily without planning their week around fuel access. Compare this to a basic hybrid RAV4. Less futuristic, less impressive on a brochure, but it can be refueled anywhere, serviced anywhere, and sold anywhere. That difference is everything. Mirai owners describe anxiety instead of confidence, route planning instead of convenience. And when it comes time to sell, silence instead of offers. And here's the part nobody tells you. The Mirai didn't become worthless because hydrogen failed. It became worthless because buyers realized too late that infrastructure matters more than innovation. And the next SUV on this list didn't fail because of fuel. It failed because of something buyers trusted even more. Price protection only works until manufacturers panic. This SUV matters because it proves how fast luxury collapses when incentives replace demand. Look at the Mercedes-Benz EQS SUV. This was marketed as the electric S-Class on stilts. A six-figure flagship designed to signal status, stability, and future-proof ownership. Here's what actually happened. Most EQS SUVs transacted between $110,000 and $125,000. Within 12 to 18 months, real-world resale offers dropped below $60,000. That's a loss of over 50% before the second registration renewal. This is the part nobody tells you. The vehicle didn't suddenly become bad. Mercedes made it bad in the market. When early demand stalled, Mercedes flooded leases with massive subsidies. Monthly payments dropped thousands below what owners paid to buy. That instantly poisoned used values. Translate that into reality. If someone can lease a brand new EQS SUV for less than your used payment, your resale is dead. Buyers don't negotiate. They walk. Compare this to a gas GLS. Older tech, fewer screens, but it holds value because Mercedes doesn't dump it to move inventory. Ownership tells the rest of the story. EQS SUV owners report software glitches, cramped third-row space, and interiors that don't feel six-figure. Service visits take longer because EV-certified technicians are limited, and resale conversations end fast once incentives come up. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Luxury buyers forgive flaws. They do not forgive feeling played. And the next SUV didn't collapse because of incentives or price cuts. It collapsed because buyers stopped trusting the brand entirely. Reliability collapse doesn't need headlines to destroy value. This SUV matters because it shows how fast resale dies once owners stop defending their own purchase. Look at the Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe. This was supposed to be the safe electrified upgrade. A family SUV with hybrid efficiency, tax credits, and Jeep credibility. Here's what actually happened. Within the first 18 months, owner complaints spiked across transmission behavior, electrical faults, and hybrid system failures. Dealers quietly extended service timelines. Some vehicles spent months waiting for parts. This is where it breaks. When reliability problems stack early, resale doesn't decline gradually. It collapses all at once. Used buyers don't care about incentives you received. They care about stories they read. Translate that into money. Grand Cherokee 4xe models that sold around $55,000 are now trading in the mid-20s to low 30s. That's over 50% gone while the vehicle is still under warranty. Compare this to a standard gas Grand Cherokee. Less complex, less efficient on paper, but it doesn't strand owners in service bays. Daily ownership tells the truth. Owners describe warning lights without explanations. Dealers resetting systems instead of fixing root causes. And the constant fear that the next update will introduce a new problem. Here's the part nobody wants to admit. Hybrid complexity only works when reliability is flawless. When it isn't, buyers run. And the next SUV on this list didn't fail because it broke or glitched. It failed because it aged out of relevance overnight. Technology doesn't have to break to destroy resale. This SUV matters because it proves how fast buyers abandon a vehicle the moment it feels outdated. Look at the Infiniti QX80. For years, it was sold as quiet, powerful, and dependable luxury. A safe alternative for buyers who didn't want complexity. Here's what actually happened. The QX80 is built on a platform that traces back to 2011. The interior tech, driver assistance, and fuel economy lagged competitors by a full generation. And buyers knew a redesign was coming long before it arrived. This is the part nobody tells you. Once a replacement is obvious, the outgoing model collapses in value even if nothing is wrong with it. Translate that into numbers. QX80s that transacted around $75,000 lost nearly half their value before the first major service interval. Some dealers admitted they priced them aggressively just to move them before the redesign lands. Compare this to a Lexus LX of the same era. Also old, also thirsty, but Lexus updates just enough to maintain confidence. Ownership reality seals it. Owners describe tech that feels behind the moment they drive something newer. Infotainment that feels slow, and resale conversations that start with excuses instead of offers. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Luxury doesn't protect you from obsolescence. Sometimes it accelerates it. And the next SUV didn't fail because it was old or unreliable. It failed because nobody knows what it's supposed to be. Confusion is lethal in a collapsing market. This SUV matters because it shows what happens when a vehicle has no clear reason to exist. Look at the Mercedes-Benz EQB. It was marketed as an electric luxury SUV for families. Compact, premium, efficient, and future-ready. Here's what actually happened. Mercedes launched the EQB at around $55,000. Within months, dealers were discounting new units by $10,000 to $12,000 just to move inventory. Used prices collapsed immediately after. This is where it breaks. Once new cars are discounted aggressively, used values don't slowly adjust. They fall off a cliff. Translate that into ownership reality. 2-year-old EQBs now sell for under $30,000. That's less than many used gas GLCs with similar mileage. Compare this to a Tesla Model Y. Not a luxury brand, not traditionally premium, but buyers understand what it is and what it delivers. Daily experience tells the rest. EQB owners report average range, unremarkable charging speeds, and interiors that feel borrowed rather than designed. It doesn't feel special enough to justify luxury pricing, and it doesn't feel efficient enough to win EV buyers. Here's the truth nobody says out loud. If buyers can't explain why your SUV exists, they won't buy it used. And the next SUV didn't collapse because of confusion or incentives. It collapsed because too many identical ones hit the market at the same time. Oversupply doesn't feel dangerous until resale stops working. This SUV matters because it shows how fast value collapses when fleets exit all at once. Look at Polestar 2. It entered the market positioned as a premium electric alternative. Minimalist design, European branding, and early EV credibility. Here's what actually happened. Large rental and fleet operators bought tens of thousands of Polestar 2s in a short window. When EV demand cooled and pricing shifted, those fleets dumped inventory back into the used market almost simultaneously. Supply exploded overnight. Pay attention to this. Private resale values don't fall gradually when fleets panic. They get crushed instantly. Translate that into numbers. Polestar 2s that sold between $50,000 and $60,000 now trade in the low 30s. Some dip below that depending on mileage and trim. That's over 50% gone without a single mechanical failure. Compare this to a BMW 3 Series. Older platform, slower transition to EVs. But BMW protects resale by controlling volume. Ownership reality confirms it. Polestar owners describe solid driving dynamics, but growing concern over brand clarity. Many buyers still don't know what Polestar is. And used buyers avoid unfamiliar badges when alternatives exist. Here's the part nobody wants to admit. Fleet exposure turns premium cars into commodities. Once that happens, value never recovers. And the final SUV on this list didn't collapse because of oversupply or branding. It collapsed because the entire category moved past it. When a market moves forward, anything left behind gets erased. This SUV matters because it proves how fast relevance disappears when technology stagnates. Do you want a vehicle that feels good today, or one you can exit tomorrow without bleeding cash? Because the next video goes deeper. We're breaking down the SUVs people think are safe right now, and why some of them are already sliding toward the same fate. If you want to stay ahead of the market instead of reacting to it, you know what to do. Look at the Nissan Leaf. For years, it was praised as a practical, affordable EV. Simple, proven, and early to market. Here's what actually happened. The Leaf never updated its battery cooling system. It relies on passive air cooling in a market that moved to active thermal management years ago. In hot climates, battery degradation accelerated fast. This is where it breaks. EV buyers don't fear mileage. They fear battery health. Translate that into value loss. Leafs that sold for $35,000 to $40,000 now trade for under $15,000. Some owners report 20 to 30% battery degradation within a few years. That kills confidence instantly. Compare this to a Chevy Bolt. Not glamorous, not premium, but better thermal management and predictable degradation. Ownership reality is unforgiving. Owners describe shrinking range year after year. Summer heat amplifying losses. And resale conversations ending the moment battery reports come up. Here's the truth nobody softens. An EV without modern battery management is a countdown timer. And buyers know it. You've seen the pattern now. Hydrogen infrastructure collapse. Luxury incentives poisoning resale. Reliability failures killing trust. Obsolescence erasing relevance. Confusion destroying demand. Oversupply crushing value. Outdated technology ending entire categories. None of these SUVs failed quietly. They failed predictably. And here's the uncomfortable part. Every single collapse was visible before buyers signed. The warnings just weren't framed as consequences. So here are the two questions you need to sit with. First, loyalty or logic. Are you buying based on brand comfort or on market reality? Second, convenience or control.